Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 26th of May, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Ben Rubin. And we're delighted to have Diane, Rasmussen, McAdie joining us from the north of England. Now, if the general public in UK were not aware, it was a weekend of major strife and upheaval with a national strike, which hit a number of cities. This was really incredible stuff, and major events happened in Plymouth. And Ben, you were there.
Indeed, I was, yes. Great to be here. So police reported a tense, challenging and sensitive day over the weekend on Saturday as a wave of anti-government protests and counter-protests was staged in towns and cities around the UK. And I think staged is probably a good way to describe it. I went down to Plymouth to take a look for myself. Hello, it's Ben Rubin from UK Column in Plymouth. And a few days ago, Devon Live shared a story about an upcoming protest which is happening today, being organised by a national strike movement protesting against the Labour government. It's got a bunch of demands, it's got an agenda, a bit of a manifesto, and they're going to be out on the street protesting. Interestingly, there is a counter-protest which just happens to have been organised for the exact same time, and the counter-protest is coming out, one would have to guess, on the side of the government. And that one's been organised by a bunch of unions, including Unison, organisations like Stand Up to Racism, I've spoken about previously on the column, which is headed up by people like Diane Abbott, the long-time Labour MP. And I think there's something a little bit fishy going on here. Where have these protests come from? What are they actually for? Who's behind them? And what's going to happen on the ground today in Plymouth? Let's find out.
Interesting observations, Ben, and I think you're spot on. Something very strange. What did you discover?
Something very strange going on. A protest and a counter-protest, all conveniently organised at the same time. This Devon Live article that I mentioned in that little piece there is how I came across this, but it's been all across social media. Police prepare for national strike in Plymouth this Saturday. Concerns have been raised of a repeat of last summer's disorder. That's referring to some low-level violence and a few arrests that were made on August the 5th last year, which is in the immediate aftermath of the Southport killings. There were lots of protests all around the country, including the Walthamstow protest, which I reported on, which was actively if not arranged by, then certainly led by Stand Up to Racism, as I'm going to get into a little bit later on in the piece. But let's have a look here at back to the article. There's a bit of description about this national strike. A quote from the organisers: "The people of the UK are under attack from the very people elected to serve us." I have to say that I agree with that. They say, "Let our government, local councils and judiciary know that we are Great Britain." So this is a patriotic message. There is discussion of illegal immigration, demands to leave the European Court of Human Rights, the cancellation of net zero, the scrapping of inheritance tax, a demand for the government to release all documentation with regards to the Pakistani rape gang inquiry, calls for freedom of speech provisions for the UK to prevent beliefs and opinions being criminalised. I think a lot of this stuff is fairly reasonable, to be honest with you. It also says, by coincidence, these are consistently the talking points by MPs and councillors belonging to Reform and previously UKIP, as well as Conservative MPs. So this has very much been positioned on the right wing. This is the national strike anti-government protest.
Can I be a bit tougher, Ben, and say, to me, this is anybody who's actually challenging the government quite rightly in these areas is now going to be smeared with activities by this unknown group of people. That's my take.
That's certainly what it feels like. There's also some quite inflammatory language in there. So actually it talks about justice for an estimated 1 million plus little girls with the Pakistani rape gangs. I think that's probably overestimating it. I think it's certainly tens, maybe hundreds of thousands, and I'm not diminishing that at all, right? But actually they've over-engineered that statistic a little bit, I think. And also there's, again, just this focus on the Pakistani rape gang issue, which certainly is an issue, but actually this is a much broader problem. Right, so there's a lot of stuff in here that actually I think that I would agree with, but then actually it feels like they've overdone it in certain areas. And actually, I'm a little bit suspicious about why they might want to do that, to be honest with you. We'll come back to that as we go along. Who's behind this? So it's this organisation, the Great British National Strike, which is run by a former soldier called Richard Donaldson. And this just popped up in August last year. Right, so we got this relatively new, relatively unknown organisation, which has just somehow managed to organise a network of protests all around the UK. So there were 3 in Devon and Cornwall alone. I think we had Torquay, Exeter, Plymouth, and then these have been going all around the country: Lincoln, Norwich, Swansea, Manchester, Edinburgh. And actually, apparently, there's some stuff been going on internationally as well. So places like Amsterdam, I've heard talk that there was a similar thing happening on the same day, based around the same issues. Not saying that all the international stuff was necessarily organised by this organisation, but there does appear to be quite a lot of coordination happening here around these supposedly organic street protests. Anyway, let's head back to the article, because as I said, there is a counter-protest as well. Really importantly, the counter-protest, as I mentioned in the film, comes from Unison. So this is a union-backed thing, the National Education Union, the RMT, Plymouth Women's Network. So we're getting this kind of gender-based, intersectional perspective coming into this. And importantly, groups such as Stand Up to Racism, who we spoke about again last year, Diane Abbott, it was the president. This is very closely linked into the top levels of the Labour government, right up to cabinet, but also the kind of historical anti-fascist movement, Hope Not Hate, these kinds of organisations, right? And this sort of anti-fascist message was absolutely central. As you can see again here on the piece, no fascists in Plymouth. Join the counter demo. Far-right groups online have called for demonstrations in cities across the UK under the farcical banner of a national strike, even though they're not backed by a union, because apparently it's only unions you can strike. And apparently this strike is in favour of a tax on immigrants and Asian communities, tax exemptions for millionaire farmers, and climate change denying conspiracy theories.
So I've got to say, Ben, this agenda to me is being wound up by Devon Live. I wonder whether this is a democracy reporter who's actually put this together. So we've got unknown people who establish a supposedly nationwide demonstration, then they're supported by bona fide organisations. How does that work? And then they get massive coverage in Devon Live. If this was just an event which had been created by some of the, let's say, reform, would it have the coverage in Devon Live that this event has got? And I would suggest no. No,
certainly not. And there was an ITV crew down there, and it's been on the BBC, and it's been pretty much blanket coverage, actually, right? So call me suspicious. But anyway, the counter-protest, interestingly, kicked off first. So I went down to the city centre, and I had a little look at what was going on. You can see quite a bit of police presence there. This is just after 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Lots of people who are sort of not quite coppers, so the community people and private security. And you can see all the flags are there. So Unite's there, Unison, the Refugees Welcome, Stop the Far Right banners from Stand Up to Racism. And there's a lot of people, about 100 people, and this crowd grew to about 150, 200. A lot of people like this fella here with a mask on. really not wanting to have anyone see who he is, actually, right? There were quite a few people like that. And I spoke to someone in the crowd who said that they had spoken to some people who were masked up who'd come from out of town, right? So actually, I get the sense that quite a few of these people are not from Plymouth. Although they are, interestingly, given that this is a counter-protest to the anti-government protest, they are actually quite down on Keir Starmer. So there's a little sign you can see there which says Starmer has blood on his hands, which is absolutely correct. Might be a little bit small on the screen for some people, but down the bottom in the centre there, you can see that. And that's obviously to do with this. And these were the two largest flags flying on the day. So you've got the Palestinian flag on the left-hand side there. And then what I see is essentially the globalist flag, right? That's what that flag is to me, that transgender LGBTQ flag. That's about globalism, ultimately. And the key thing for me here is that you're not going to unite the British people under those two flags. Those aren't our flags, right? It's not to say that we don't care about Gaza, we don't care about Palestine, but if you're going to try to create a united national movement to fix the country, you've got to do it under your own flag, ultimately, right? Really importantly, and that's not what these people do. Who else was there? So this was the TUC, Plymouth Trades Union Council, who actually were established in 1897. I know I said a minute ago that I think quite a lot of these people were from out of town, or they're students, or that kind of thing. There were some roots here, right? So to give them their due, this is an organisation that's been in Plymouth, no doubt looking out for the welfare of working people for a long time, right? So it wasn't just the case, but there were also some of these kind of not quite paramilitary groups, but certainly activist, anti-fascist types, and the sorts of people that you get along with that, right? So there's a lot of young men in groups with masks, looking quite uncomfortable, to be honest with you, right? And then you got a real sense with this lot, and I'll get into it a bit more in a moment, that actually they're quite intimidated. They're quite, they're scared of this sort of far-right bogeyman, basically. And I think that's driving a lot of the behaviour. All the messaging was being driven by essentially a ringleader. So there's this guy here. I don't know who this is, but I'd certainly like to find out. And he was leading chants through the day. They were handing out these leaflets. You know, this is all very, very well organised. I'll pull a few of these out so we can have a look at them. The top one was repeated a lot, saying, "We are many, you are few, we are Plymouth, who are you?" And that was all being directed to the opposition side, right? And actually, I see that as a provocation because actually, as we'll come on to it a little bit later, the people on the other side of the square that were in the protest were Plymouthians. You go and talk to them and you can hear, right? Their accent was a local accent. They're local people. They're concerned about the future of the country. So I see this as a provocation, not just that chant, but really a lot of the behaviour on the ground as well. Health and housing degradation is not caused by immigration. BS, I won't say the word, but you know what I'm saying. Come off it. The enemy is profit. So there's a lot of this sort of, it's illogical, right? Health and housing degradation is not caused by immigration. Well, it might not be the only thing that causes it, but actually if you load in millions of additional people into the country, then the health system's going to suffer, housing's going to suffer, it's going to degrade. So you're chanting things which just aren't true. And then a really, really heavy anti-nationalist, globalist message: no borders, no nations. Yeah. Yeah, they want to destroy the nation state. Brick by brick, wall by wall, racist borders have to fall. Borders are racist. Yeah. This is the position that we're being presented with. That is a totally radical position. Yeah. There is nothing mainstream about that, really, when you get into it. Right. But we're being told that this is supposedly the voice of Plymouth, the voice of the people of the Southwest. And I'm not sure I buy it.
I think there's a good way of putting it, Ben. This demonstration orchestrated by unknown people is to tell us something. It's to tell us how we should think.
Yes.
So highly manipulative event, not only manipulating the people who attended, but also the people who receive the message via the wider mainstream press. There's something very devious going on.
Indeed, there is. Yeah. Now let's just have a little listen to the chants. We've got a quick video for you.
Degradation is not caused by immigration.
Bullshit! Come off it! The enemy is profit!
Health and housing degradation is not caused by
So there you go. We are Plymouth. Who are you? You're the fascists. You're the Nazis. And who's he actually talking about? Well, you look on the other side of the square. When that was happening, you basically got about 20 older ladies, mothers, grandmothers, who are concerned about what's going on in the country, basically. They're talking about the boats. They're talking about two-tier justice. They're talking about the issue of net zero. Lucy Connolly was a name that came up a lot. And the left wing, the counter-protesters, are basically standing there screaming at these people from the other side of the square at 11 o'clock in the morning. You know, the tone of it was remarkable, as I go on to describe in this next little clip.
So this is kind of mad, actually. So it's basically what we've got is the anti-fascists over there, who are fairly numerous and very clearly quite well organised. Lots of banners, lots of leaflets, guy on a microphone who's leading this chant. And there's probably, I don't know, a couple of hundred people tops. And then on the other side of the fountain, you got the main protest, which hasn't started yet. So this slot started at 11, and the actual protest is starting at midday, supposedly. And over this side of the fountain, we've got, it's basically about 20 people. And they're sort of standing there, looking quite bemused by the whole thing, to be honest with you. And the guy leading the chanting over there, I don't know who that is. Basically, he's spent about 5 minutes explaining to all of the people in his crowd that they should be scared of the fascists and that they need to stay together so they don't get attacked, and then to follow him 30 feet over there so that they can basically stand there and shout at these other people. And that's what they've been doing for the past sort of 5 or 10 minutes.
So the crowd did get significantly larger, actually, on the other side of the fountain, and a lot more men turned up. The ladies were there early, and but it was a really interesting mix of people. Right, it wasn't an organised group particularly. They'd heard about this on social media. They wanted to come out and basically, I would imagine, have a bit of a discussion and a debate about what's going on in the country. But they were being prevented from doing that by just this racket coming from the counter-protest on the other side of the square. And I had some great conversations. A couple of people who recognised me, a couple of UK column viewers came up to say hi. It was fantastic. One of the things that I was slightly concerned about, you can just see here, the lady policeman, is that what, can I say that? The police ladies
just
walking around, they're all wearing cameras, right? And so it was always in the back of my mind that actually a lot of this is a data gathering exercise, right? And I think that the people who've set this thing up essentially want to see who comes out, how they behave, and get a load of information about what's happening in the city ultimately. And this will be going on all around the UK. Now that was just 5 minutes into the start of the protest. They carried on going with their chanting for the next hour and a half, as I describe in this last little clip.
So it's now 1:15, and the anti-fascists, Plymouth is anti-fascist, is it? They're still going. They've been chanting for about an hour and a half now, and you've got a bunch of people on the other side of the fountain there, a lot of whom are just normal people, you know, concerned about the direction of the country. Had some very interesting conversations. People basically saying we're being governed by an international crime syndicate, which I completely agree with, and we got a lot of concerns about what that international crime syndicate is doing in the country. And That all seems perfectly reasonable, but there's no actual discussion going on because the anti-fascists, with their stand up to racism banners, and their socialist worker banners and all the kind of usual suspects, are just shouting at people.
Which actually seems to be the tone of national debate more broadly, doesn't it? People just shouting at each other, and in the volume, no appreciation for shared heritage, shared objectives. Any of the things that would actually lead to useful progress in the country. Now, obviously, this has been presented by Stand Up to Racism as some kind of great victory against the far right. We can see here from the website the far right Great British Strike has been seen off by determined anti-racist resistance who just happen to want to destroy the nation state. That is their literal stated position. That's what they're out there talking about. And what about the national strike movement? Well, UNN pulled this out from Twitter, which I think speaks volumes, actually. This is a bit of interaction here between an account called Neki, another one of these nationalist accounts that's popped up in the last year or two, saying, when do you think we will reach the stage of civil war in the UK? The Great British National Strike Group saying, I feel like it's imminent, right? So actually it strikes me that this is part of this narrative and this attempt to spark off civil conflict. And UNN, good on them, say these people are going to march the Tommy Tards to the top of the hill and then run off, just watch. And I think that that's probably fair to say. It screams of psychological operation being run by the establishment. And it's basically a direct attack on patriotic working class men and women. That's the way that I took it. And interestingly, as a final point, the Great British National Strike Twitter page has just been taken down, and we don't know what's going on there, but I'm sure we'll find out more as the week goes on.
Ben, thank you very much for that excellent summary of events in Plymouth. We've taken quite a long time to cover this because we think it's so important, because, of course, it wasn't just happening and hasn't just happened in Plymouth. It's happened in other cities as well. It's happened in Northern Ireland. And as many people are now beginning to think, is this type of event designed to not only demoralise people in the country, but to destabilise communities? And meanwhile, we get the globalist agenda pushed through, and if you dare challenge it, you're some sort of right-wing extremist.
Exactly.
So we regard this as a very, very dangerous precedence on the streets of UK, and we're certainly going to be digging into it more. If any of our viewers and listeners have information about who is behind these sorts of events, then please do let us know. Well, we're going to move on by going to another hotspot, but this time on the global stage, and that's Ukraine. And surprisingly or not, emotions very high around Ukraine as well. So over the weekend, we've had Trump supposedly calling Putin absolutely crazy as a result of the fact the Russians unleashed another massive drone strike across Ukraine as a whole over the last couple of days. And the Kremlin looking at the West and saying everybody's very emotional. So we've got bloodshed on a truly horrific scale in Ukraine continuing, but the West is deeply unhappy because their narrative is falling apart. Let's have a look at this interview clip with Colonel Douglas Macgregor talking on how he sees Ukraine.
My point is the Dnieper River is a natural barrier. And I've said over and over and over again, I'm sure the Russian General Staff, these are competent men, I'm sure they've said to the president, Mr. President, let's march to the river. Whatever we do, let us control everything east of the river. That gives us a buffer zone against any future threats that may emanate from what remains of Ukraine. And let the rest of it go. After all, the Poles, Romanians, the Hungarians, probably the Lithuanians, the Moldovans, everybody is making claims on portions of Western Ukraine. The Romanians would like to have Bessarabia back. Most of the people listening to us today don't even know what that is. My point is, this is a very old part of the world. We need to get out of it. It's not us. We know nothing about it. But everybody who lives in it and around it does know about it. They need to sort this out. And I can guarantee you that there's very little enthusiasm for crossing that Dnieper River and moving further west. They don't want to do it. It's more trouble than it's worth. You end up with lots of people under your administrative control that hate you and always have because of that boundary that I just discussed, which has been valid for hundreds of years. So the bottom line is, let's stop the nonsense. President Trump, suspend all further aid to this Ukrainian disaster. Get out, offer to host a conference. We can host it in Europe. We can host it anywhere they would like. Let them all come. Without us, by the way. We could have a representative that sits in and listens, but let the people that live in it and around it make the decision on where the new boundaries will be drawn. And let it go. It's not us. It's not our country.
Well, I wonder whether any reasonable person could disagree with what General McGregor had to say on that. I certainly couldn't disagree with anything. But the interview that clip was part of, there were some other things which were discussed. Let's have a listen.
Yeah, it could be that Trump is moving in that direction because he did say that that the two sides are going to be the ones who are going to figure this part out. We're not going to. So apparently he is out of the mediating business. We'll see if that continues to be the case. But what could be, and I stress could be, motivating him and hopefully to make the very decision you just articulated is because he's taken a look and things are literally starting to crumble on the battlefield. We've been talking about the possibility of this for a long time, but there are more signs that something is afoot here. First of all, a week or so ago, the New York Times reported from the Institute for the Study of War, which sometimes has good numbers, even if their analysis is just hideous. But they said over the previous 16 months, the Russians had taken 1,800 square kilometers from Ukraine. They don't even talk about in there how many troops that the Ukraine side had lost. But then they point out that in wars of attrition, incremental gains can presage a breakthrough if the losing side runs out of troops, ammunition, and its defensive lines collapse. Now then we have, in the last just few days here, the commander of the 47th Mechanized Brigade was resigned, and this is their premier mechanized brigade, the 47th, because he said, these stupid decisions that these guys keep making that get us killed and don't even have a chance of success, he finally resigned in disgust. Then, right after that, the commander of the 59th Brigade was fired because, and when you read down into the details, it's not just that he didn't do a good job. It's that in the Pokrovsk area that Julian Ripker was showing just a second ago, he had a tactical redeployment of his troops from an unfavorable position to a favorable position, but it was a little bit further back. And so almost like a Hitler type deal, the Ukraine leadership with Sersky and then, of course, Zelensky says not 1 inch. No, you can't redeploy anywhere, even if it makes sense.
So more detail there, disaster on the battlefield for Ukraine. And this is the correct situation on the battlefield at the moment. And this is the reason why the West at the moment is so uncertain in reporting. They daren't report what is actually happening on the battlefield. Are the Russians taking losses? Absolutely. Are they continuing to move forward? Absolutely. So let's contrast that opinion with how the West likes to project what's happening on the battlefield. And we've got a little clip here with General Ben Hodges and Times Radio.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And we are joined today by senior retired American General, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges.
After 11 years of this war, with Russia having every advantage, they still only control about 18% of Ukraine. And it's not getting any better. They do not have the ability to knock Ukraine out of the war. They don't have any massive breakthrough capabilities or some force that could exploit any penetration along the front lines. In fact, what we're seeing the Russians is just continuation of these what the Ukrainians refer to as meat assaults, people on mopeds and motorcycles and e-scooters and golf carts, and they're getting slaughtered. I mean, they lost, according to British intelligence, almost 400,000 casualties last year for a gain of almost zero.
But Putin's never said that he wants to control Ukraine, right?
Absolutely. A key point. So the West continually talking about Putin wanting to invade and take over the whole of Ukraine, when clearly that's not the reality. But this is the opinion that's consistently put across to the UK public and the American public. So we've got to get to the bottom of what's going on here. But the fact is that Russia is moving forward on the battlefield. These are some more reports from the Kiev Independent. Russian troops have upped the intensity of their Donetsk Oblast offensive in recent weeks, increasingly pressurizing a relatively large Ukrainian pocket between some of the last cities in the region. But these pockets are forming all over the Ukraine front at the moment. Russian troops have been pushing forward towards Konstantinivka from two directions, slowly closing in on the Ukrainian pocket west of Toretsk. This is not a stalled battlefield. This is a battlefield which is moving, and the Russians are moving forward, but the West doesn't want to report it. Ukrainian soldiers who spoke to the Kiev Independent often criticized their command to hold until the end, even if the positions would soon be overrun by Russian troops, and the Ukrainians would be left without proper evacuation or orderly withdrawal. And this is the situation that's repeated. And of course, when the withdrawal is not orderly, this is when the Ukrainians take such huge losses. But who's reporting in any case from Ukraine? Well, here's the Kiev Independent. And if we have a look at the young journalist who wrote the article I've just read those excerpts from, Asami Terajima. Now, this young lady says that originally she was living in Russia with her family. They then moved to Ukraine. Her mum and dad now can't be in Ukraine, so they've moved to Poland, but she's still there reporting. She's very, very young, and I was fascinated that when I have a look at her, she was apparently featured in the Media Development Foundation's 25 under 25 young and bold list from 2023. And that's a list of emerging media makers in Ukraine. So let's have a look at her in a bit more detail. So there's a photo. You can see how young she is, 21-year-old college student who's apparently now reporting factually on the war, on the battlefield. But who's in the background providing the support for these kind of young journalists that are spewing out the Western desired media? Well, this one, you know, Ben, you've come across before, the Sigrid Rousing Trust.
Absolutely, yeah. Tetra Pak, the people who make the milk cartons, it's that family.
Just a family. Well, that's a very interesting point, as we'll see in a minute. So it's saying here that the Rousing Trust has given the Media Development Foundation $120,000 in March 2022 in response to the crisis in Ukraine. And if we have a look at the Rousing Trust, we notice that it's got a strong open societies flavour. But this is where it gets fascinating for a family foundation. They've put out 900 plus grants since 1995. Look at the sum of money they're dealing with. Over £500 million available to help shape the media in Ukraine. So is this free media? I don't think so. There's something else going on. And if you also want a little take on the situation in Ukraine, this is the Kiev Post from back in April, the end of April. And they were reporting that Mike Waltz was saying information about Ukraine that wasn't true. So they'd fact-checked it. US National Security Advisor at the time, Waltz, pushes alternative facts on Ukraine. He said Ukraine is a disastrously corrupt country and the oversight of US resources given to Ukraine is poorly tracked. He went on to say that Ukraine was one of and is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Well, this was fact-checked by the Kiev Post. It said the part about Ukraine being one of the world's most corrupt countries is false. And they went on to then say that according to Transparency International's 2024 Corruptions Perceptions Index, corruption in Ukraine is mid-range on a worldwide standard, and Ukraine has achieved the 105th place from amongst 180 countries, along with Serbia, sandwiched between Dominican Republic and Algeria. So if you want to see the site that came from, here it is with a list of countries on the left. Apparently Denmark came top of the squeaky clean list, but you'll have to look way down for UK here at number 20. Is it all okay that we're providing all this help and support for a corrupt country to run a war where millions of men on both sides are being killed and maimed? It's pretty despicable, I think. Don't know whether you've got any comments on that organisation, Ben, but I found it quite incredible that a family organisation has got $500 million to hand out to help shape global journalism.
Absolutely, yes. And also, what else are they into? We're going to have to come back to that another time. I'm also quite struck that the UK is only 20th. I think we're more corrupt than that, but we do a good job of convincing people we aren't. Yes,
that's absolutely true. Well, on that unhappy note, I think we need a little bit more concentration on who is doing what to try and help the country. So, Diane, let's bring you in with us. You have been starting to really pay attention to who's out there in UK trying to do the right things. What have you got for us today?
Thanks, Brian. Hello, Ben. It's really great to be here today. And I absolutely believe that if we don't start to act locally, we're not going to be able to fight against this larger agenda, which I've said several times and I will say again. Yesterday, I went out to a Stand in the Park event in County Durham. It's a beautiful place until it started raining and we all left. But if anyone remembers Stand in the Park events that started back when they locked us up a few years ago, this particular group in County Durham has been quite strong and has been going since August of 2021, and they meet every Sunday. And so they were there, they were making breakfast, they offered me a cup of coffee as soon as I showed up. There were several UK Column members who were there. They were wearing UK Column hats. And later in the day, based on an invitation I received while I was there in the morning, I went to one of the houses of one of the members for coffee. And it was really nice to see a copy of Your Life in their hands right there on his coffee table. So it was really great to see that they were so involved in UK Column. So I recorded an interview with one of the gentlemen who was at the meeting yesterday morning, and his name is Tim Coulter. And what he had been doing was he wrote letters to MPs asking about the issue of informed consent, or obviously lack thereof, regarding the COVID jabs and what happened to him. So here's just a short clip of that interview.
But he really didn't have ability to make the claims, and of course the whole business of the COVID debacle has been about people making ludicrous claims and then not being able to back it up with any actual real fact. And so I then wrote similar notice to the MP, and in fact 2 notices. After that he didn't want to speak to me.
So that sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? And within this group, there's another group called We the People Northeast, and they handed me a business card. They have a Rumble channel, and the link to their channel will be in the show notes. They do what they call seeking the truth through insightful interviews. And so I looked at this channel and chose a clip of one of our favorite journalists. Let's see what he had to say to this group.
Can I ask you both individually if you think there's one particular direction we should be concentrating on to actually get the message across to the public?
About what?
About any of these psyops. Which psyop or which direction should we concentrate on?
The key one we should be talking about is the government's use of applied psychology on us. Because this is where the whole distortion of perception starts. In their document dated 2010, the Cabinet Office said, we can change the way people behave. That means think and behave. And they will not necessarily know this has been done to them. Right? Now, it's scary if they use that type of applied psychology on an ordinary member of the public, but what happens when they use that psychology on somebody they're going to use to train other people? then you end up with a trainer who has themselves been affected by the technology, subjecting other people to another dose of psychology, but by a person who's not even the normal self.
Yeah.
Right? So at each iteration, the thing gets worse. And if I was just having a guess, I'm not guessing this is going on because the government's own documents said it was going on. And during lockdown, the Behavioural Insights team was working inside the SPY-B system for the government advising on the COVID rate, saying we need to make the public more frightened in order to increase lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
As I understand it,
so the one to go for is the attack on our minds.
And I know, Brian, we hear this from you quite often, and I think you're absolutely spot on, but I think it's really important to see that UK Column team members, as well as people who pay for memberships and watch the UK Column, that we're all getting it out and doing things and sharing the messages. And the more that we do this, the more it will spread. And I believe this is one of the ways that we can fight back. And I don't know what you think, Brian.
Well, it's knowing what you're fighting against is the key thing. Unless you know what you're fighting against and you can see it and identify it, you cannot fight. It's that simple. And what we have been pushing for so many years is that it's not a simple battle between good and bad people. We've got manipulation of perceptions as well. And as we're seeing with the protest that we've just started today's news with, was that a genuine protest created by people with genuine reasons to protest, or is this something that's actually been created in order to change public perception of not only individual but viewpoints? And I would say it's the latter. So we've got to keep educating people as to what they're actually fighting and calling out people who are doing the wrong thing. And what is really dangerous is where we get lured into believing that a label of a group of people means that everybody under that label is bad. If you're right wing, you're bad. That is never true for everybody. Similarly, for left wing, it's not true for those supporting Israel. It's not true of people supporting Gaza. We have to look at what they are actually saying at any particular time, and we have to break out of this this intense drive to lock us into the fact that you've got a label and therefore everybody put under that label is bad and is doing the wrong thing. I don't know how else to explain that, Ben, but I think it's a critical thing for us.
That is the critical point, right? It's the divide and rule. Left v right, men v women, black v white. That's what they're trying to embed and entrench, and that's what will stop us from being successful.
Right. But people have got to get out. They've got to be doing their very best to challenge what's going on, and that means in every reasonable way they can. Violence locks you into the state system. They want the violence. So non-violent protest in every possible way is the right way to go.
And if I might add, discussion, because the overriding sense that I got from the event on Saturday was that the people over there who were shouting at these people, actually, they should just go and talk to them, and they'd find they had a lot in common, actually.
Yeah. A lot more to talk about this. We can do more in extra after today's news. But let's first of all say a huge thank you to everybody supporting UK Column. We can only do this because of your financial support. So thank you everybody who's donating to the UK Column or who's taken out a membership, monthly or annual or lifetime membership. This allows us to operate. So if you're watching us for the first time today and you're not a member or a donator to the UK Column, please consider doing that, because that's why we're here, to use your generosity in order to get facts and information out. Now, on this evening, at 7 o'clock, we've got another germ warfare episode. What is German new medicine? And we've also got a very interesting, that I'm sure will be a very interesting session from germ warfare. But Ben, you've also recently completed this interview with Dr. David Miller and Vanessa Beeley. What have you been looking at here, Ukraine and Israel?
Looking at the historical and contemporary links between Israel and Ukraine and questioning as to whether they may actually be more closely aligned than most people realise. That's coming up tomorrow.
Okay, so a teaser there, Ben. Thank you for that. But this is a really, really interesting subject. The more you delve into Ukraine, the more you're coming up against the power and influence of Israel. And I think this is something that we need to lift the stone on if we're going to help the path to peace in Ukraine. We'll see what you have to say there. Now, Diane, you've also got Defensive Libraries here, which is another group working to challenge what's happening for these events.
Well, this is actually sponsored by the Buckingham branch of Academics for Academic Freedom through Professor Dennis Hayes. And I will be speaking at this event. It says there, why we need to challenge woke approaches if we are to preserve our libraries. This will be a talk that I've been invited to give on the 12th of June at 6 p.m. If you can get down to Buckingham, Milton Keynes area, I'd love to see you there. Tickets are free.
Okay, thank you for that. And we've also got an objection to the geoengineering experiments.
Yes, this is just a protest that's happening on the 21st of June down in London, if you can get down there. And I thought this one was particularly worth noticing because friends of ours at the UK column, Sonia Poulton, as well as Mark Devlin, will be two of the speakers there. And we've been digging into quite a bit of geoengineering topics recently, which we will do later in the news as well. So just get down to Hyde Park if you can on the 21st of June.
Okay, thank you for that. And as we've been reporting, we've got the Sounds Beautiful Festival, June the 26th to the 29th in Wimborne, Dorset. We've got the Thetford Truth and Freedom Beer Festival, Friday the 18th to the 19th of July. And we've also got the Bank Holiday Weekend Freedom Music Festival. That's the 22nd to the 25th of August. And if you are going to that, we will see you there, which will be really good. Now, very, very quickly, I've an eye on the time at the moment. We have this report that the BBC has picked up from France. Now, I will have to come back to this because there's so much in this report. It's a report about a court case around a particularly vile paedophile who was operating through the medical system in France. And the interesting thing is that the headline starts to ask a question. Victims in landmark child abuse trial ask why France doesn't want to know. And I was very interested in this. And I've got to say, an interesting article from Andrew Harding. And if we look into some of the detail that he's written, he says that basically the trial of France's most prolific paedophile, Yoel Le Scouarnec, a retired surgeon who was admitted in court to raping or sexually assaulting 299 people, almost all of them children, is coming to an end this Wednesday amid widespread frustration. And he goes on to quote this particular lady, one of the victims of this horrible man. She said, "I'm exhausted, I'm angry. Right now, I don't have much hope. Society seems totally indifferent. It's frightening to think that the rapes could happen again." And why is this? Well, we get an appreciation because we've got another lady here, Miss Lemoine, who says that that herself and some of the 50 other victims have been stung by an apparent lack of public interest in the trial, and they've formed their own campaign group to pressure the French authorities, accusing the government of ignoring what they say is a landmark case, which exposed a true laboratory of institutional failures. Now, this is very, very similar to what we hear in UK. So we'll just go on here. It says the issue is that this trial is about the sexual abuse of children. There's a virtual omerta on this topic globally, but particularly in France. We simply don't want to acknowledge it, said the lawyer representing several of the victims. Now, what she's talking about there is the mafia code of silence. And this is being picked up by people in this case. And the lawyer who reported on the case, who's been supporting the victims, says there's a very important standoff between those who want to denounce child sexual violence and those who want to cover it up. And this standoff is taking place today in this trial. Who will win, she wondered. Well, if we go and have a look at the BBC article, let's see whether we can bring this up. Stephanie, you'll have to advance the slide for me, please. Can we do that? Can you advance the slide, please? Okay, all right, we seem to be there. We've small technical issue. I'm sorry about that. So here's the BBC article. Now, we should be able to actually run through this, and you will see how long it is, how extensive, how much information there is in this BBC article. Now, remember, this is about a paedophile in France, albeit a high-profile court case. But the BBC has really dug into this, although they haven't challenged the French government at all. Now, I want to remind viewers that UK Column has been reporting on what is a massive abuse of children case for Nethy in Scotland, but within UK. We've been reporting now for quite some time on this. And what has the BBC been doing? Well, I think it's that wall of silence that the French people are also talking about, because if we compare the BBC's report of the case here, let's have a look at the length of their article. So this was as a result of the court case coming up, but we know that over the years that Nethy was operating, thousands of little girls went through it, and clearly hundreds, possibly thousands, were abused. But the BBC simply not dealing with this, but giving us a demonstration of this wall of silence. Ben, it's remarkable when you get into this very harrowing subject, how the BBC does not want to engage with reporting anything around child abuse in the UK.
Hard to explain, Brian.
It is hard to explain. Diane, let's bring you back with us and tell us more about the petition against geoengineering.
Yeah, thanks. So the UK government petition that had been filed to make all forms of geoengineering affecting the environment illegal, which did get passed around quite a bit. It took a while to gain some traction, but it's finally got there. It now has around just under 156,000 signatures as of this morning, last time I checked. So that means that, of course, that Parliament will debate this. The debate in Parliament will take place later on in June. And I want to dig a little bit into the written response and kind of what this means for how they've responded so far. So the written response, I've quoted it, part of it here on this slide, which is sort of repeating, the clean energy 2030 net zero agenda. They say the priority, of course, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from human activities and to adapt to climate change. And they put geoengineering into two categories. One is the solar radiation modification, which is the dimming of the sun, et cetera. And one is the greenhouse gas removals. So what does that mean? That means that they are admitting that they are going to be looking at doing greenhouse gas removals. And it says this will be important for reaching net zero. Now, what do we know about greenhouse gas removals and who is sort of supporting this agenda? There is a particular professor down in Oxford. He's the professor of Earth Sciences, University College at Oxford. His name is Professor Gideon Henderson. He is only 20% at Oxford of his time at this particular moment. 80% of his time, as we'll see on the next slide, is spent working for the government. He is the Director General for Science Analysis in DEFRA. He is the Chief Scientific Advisor for that particular part of the government. And I have a video from him explaining to us, and this was from 6 years ago, explaining what this means about the greenhouse gas reductions.
To avoid dangerous climate change, the UK needs to reduce its emission of greenhouse gases to zero. We can reduce our emissions a lot, but we still can't get rid of all of the emissions from the industries that we rely on. So to compensate, we also need to actively remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. The Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering have just published a report which describes the various ways that we can use to achieve that removal. Some of them seem like common sense. We can plant more trees, we can change farming practices to store more carbon in soils, or we can use more wood in our buildings. But there's only so much space for trees and for buildings, so we also need to explore other routes to removal of greenhouse gases if we're going to reach net zero. One of these is to use more biofuel in our power stations and capture the resulting CO2 and bury it underground in rocks. An alternative is to actively suck carbon out of the atmosphere for storage. It will be challenging and will need research and investment starting now, but if we combine all available approaches, the UK can reach net zero by 2050. If we do so, it maintains the UK's leading global position in tackling climate change and ensures that we play our part in stewarding the planet for future generations.
So that goes back to what I reported a few weeks ago as using seaweed to suck the carbon out of the sea. So not only do we need to be thinking about what's going on in the skies, but also what they're doing underwater. And I would like to recommend to the audience that they take a look at this and submit to it, if they can, that the government is currently doing an independent review with asking for evidence related to greenhouse gas removals, and they want to hear from members of the public. So anyone can click through this form, share what they think. And I know it's easy to think that it doesn't matter, they won't listen to us. But if enough of us do it, again, it's strength in numbers. So I would encourage everyone to go in and submit and say what they have to think about this greenhouse gas removal agenda that's going on right now.
Diane, if I can just come in there and say that this is something a lot of people have trouble with. It won't make any difference. Well, one of the things that UK Column's been reporting over recent weeks is the fact that clearly the rules-based international order is desperately worried that their plans are running behind time. And why are they running slow? Because of the pushback from the wider population, not only in UK, but worldwide. So it does make a difference. And of course, if 10 people send a comment back in to that request for information from the public, it's not going to have much effect. If 10 million pushed back, it's going to have a huge effect. So don't sit there and say we can't do anything. Take the opportunity to gather some people together to tackle it. And Ben, beg your pardon, Diane, more good news with respect to people who are saying no, libraries should be for a proper purpose.
Yeah, so I would like to talk about the World Library Association because they have just asked me to join their team, and I was really happy to accept it. They are really focused on the basic topic, which I've been reporting on as well, on age appropriateness in libraries. And they are all based so far in America at this point. So they were joking with me that even though I have an American passport, I'm the first international member, making it a truly World Library Association. The executive director of the World Library Association is Dan Kleinman, who I have interviewed previously on UK Column back in December. You can watch an hour-long interview with us talking about specific actions that they have been taking in America to fight the books and the content of some of the terribly graphic sexual materials, violent materials that are showing up in school libraries and public libraries around Western countries. The mission of the World Library Association is what they just say is your library, your way. We make best practice suggestions, and you decide whether to use them to help you improve your local library services. And this basically means in America, it means they're going into library board meetings, they're going into school board meetings in their local areas. And these are people that are speaking out, making a difference by doing things like reading directly from the content of some of these books. And in some cases, the content is so violent and so sexualized, putting this in front of children, that the people get banned and thrown out of the meetings because they're exposing things that are so graphic. So I want to talk here in particular about a member of the World Library Association. Her name is Julie Gebhardt, and I had an interview with her over the weekend. And I'm going to play just part of our discussion, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. She's made some major breakthroughs recently, but this is her story right here of how she got started. being active in the World Library Association and pushing against it. And this photo that I'll be showing along with the audio is a picture of Julie actually going to a board meeting and speaking up.
So about 4 years ago, I had a 15-year-old daughter in a public high school here, just obviously the local public high school. And she came home asking me to get a book for her. And I just popped online and did a quick search. And the review that I found said this book contains graphic incestuous rape of I think 9 or 11-year-old by her father. It contains sodomy, bestiality, pedophilia, like on and on, masturbation, prostitution. I mean, everything you can even imagine in detail in this book. And so I was stunned because I had not really experienced anything like it in the public schools. And my kids had been in public schools, even in California, had never seen anything like it. So that was like my moment of reality check, and started digging at that point into what was going on in our schools.
So Julie told me is that she is very aware of the battle between the light and the dark. And she is a Christian. She quoted from Ephesians 5:11, which seems to motivate a lot of what she's doing. So the King James version of that verse of the Bible is, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. She believes that we're starting to make a progress because she thinks that people are waking up and the light is starting to win over the dark, but we have to keep fighting if this is going to happen. I asked her for some examples of some of the books that she's been fighting against. And the one that she mentioned in that audio clip that her daughter was asked to read for school is called The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Some other authors that she mentioned are Ellen Hopkins, who writes for young adult at a reading level for young adults and children, but the content is not at all for young adults and children. Another one is Craig Thompson is another author. Some books that they have found in their local middle schools, which in America is for sort of ages 11 to 14. This book is Gay, which contains basically a sex manual of all types of sex, of very deviant sexual behaviors, and telling children, whoever is reading this, how to do them. When I read the book myself, I was not even familiar with a lot of what it was talking about myself. There's a book called All Boys Aren't Blue, which is another one that is frequently challenged. And in the U.S. in particular, the reason that they're getting away with these books in the libraries is because the definition of obscenity is based on what something's called the three-pronged Miller test. And prong 3 says that if the work taken as an entire whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, scientific value, then it can be defined as obscene. But if they can say that somehow it has a literary or scientific value as it's part of a novel, then it's not considered to be obscene and therefore allowable to be in libraries for anyone of all ages. And just a quick note about how this all happened was that she lives in Hillsborough County, Florida, and she's been fighting about this. And eventually the Commissioner of Education got word of what was going on because there's a legislator in Florida, Dana Trebuchet, who was in the Florida House of Representatives. Julie was sending information about the content of some of these books to Dana, and she started posting on social media about how disgusting and deviant this all was. And then eventually the Attorney General in Florida saw what she was sharing. The superintendent responded by asking to asking to come to the meeting at the state level to explain why he wasn't doing anything about it. And so essentially what's happened now is that the Attorney General of Florida has spoken up. So we have a short clip from him from a press conference that he gave last week saying what he's doing.
I will tell you that Office of Parental Rights, while we're only a couple weeks open, we are already busy, already receiving input from the public and taking action. Just last week, we sent a letter to Hillsborough County notifying them that there's harmful sexualized content in the school system there, pornographic in nature. We were delighted that it only took a day for them to get that harmful content out of the schools, and a couple counties have quickly followed suit.
So this is just one amazing example, I think, of one woman who's a mother who was just concerned about what her children were being required to read at school. And she's made a difference at county levels, and it's spreading to more counties throughout the state. Now the Attorney General has stepped in to sort of push this forward. So we have just a last screenshot here of a tweet that she posted. So you can follow her on X, saying that, okay, this is great that they're taking these actions, but she's still expecting to want to see more. And she hopes that it continues in this direction. But this is just one mother doing something incredible. And I'm very proud now to be a member of the board of the World Library Association, Brian. So I hope I can do even more.
Very much. What a brilliant place to end on. We've got to shine light into the darkness, and we've got to take the top off this terrible grooming of children. Children are our future, so this is clearly an area which we've got to focus on. But overall, the good news is that that rules-based international order is telling us they're running late with their plans, and that is because of increasing pushback. And if we can stay discerning, we can work out when we're watching planned demonstrations in order to pit one side against the other so that ultimately the government and the powers behind it rule, then we're doing extremely well. So be kind to your fellow man, and let's be really discerning about who the bad people are and who the good people are. And we should test one another as to what direction we're going in. We must end today's news there. If you're a member of UK Column, please join us for Extra. If you're not a member of UK Column, consider signing up with us and taking out a membership, because UK Column Extra covers a lot more information usually and in a very relaxed way. And this is what a lot of people are saying to us that they'd like to see and be part of, a lot more relaxed, uplifting way of discussing what is some pretty dark news. But we'll leave it there. And UK Column News will be back on Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.